That's the old-fashioned side. I'm a throwback, the kind of man who hates progress, mistrusts technology, and never quite feels comfortable in any place where he can't see or touch some small piece of the past. I liked being here in the Salinas Valley, drought or no drought. It made me feel good because I had a sense of belonging. So why should I apologize for romanticizing it a little? And to myself, for God's sake. You're nuts, that's why, I thought. Throwback schizoid in a schizoid world and content to be that way. Like one of the guys in the story about the bookstore browser who comes across a volume called The Dual Personality and says to the clerk, "You know, part of me wants to buy this and part of me doesn't." And the clerk says, "Buy it. It's the gospel truth and it'll change your life. On the other hand, it's probably bullshit and you don't really want to know anyway." Cattleman Road unwound straight and empty. Until the freeway was built in the 60s, it had been part of the main highway through this part of the valley. Now it was just a patched-up back road, paralleled by railroad tracks on the east, the narrow, winding Salinas River, and then the highway a half-mile to the west. The bottomland here was mostly planted in wine grapes, lettuce, and beets. Beyond the railroad right-of-way, fields and sparse cattle graze sloped up to the Santa Lucia foothills, low gray-brown mounds, barren except for patches of dry grass and sage, their sides scored with deep puckered creases, like great blobs of clay that had been tossed down as part of some master sculpting plan and then inexplicably abandoned. Men worked here and there among the grapevines and green vegetables. From a distance, they might have been immigrants from the Depression-era Southwest. Even the scattered pickups and other vehicles had an ancient, dusty look, like the truck the Joads had driven from Oklahoma to California. But when you got close enough, the illusion vanished. The men were all Mexican migrants, too many of them underpaid illegals. Time had changed, all right, but only on the surface. The exploitation was the same as it had been 50 years ago. It was only the faces and skin tones of the exploited that were different. I covered 5 miles before I encountered another moving car, a big dump truck loaded with gravel swinging out of an unpaved road that snaked back into the hills. A sign at the intersection said that the side road led to the South Valley Gravel Company. It was also my landmark, the one that told me I was a mile outside San Bernardo and a quarter of a mile from Arlo Haas's farm. You couldn't miss his place, he told me on the telephone. It was the only one between the Gravel Company Road and the outskirts of town. I turned in at the open gate and bumped up over the railroad tracks. On the north, then, stood a windbreak of eucalyptus trees. On the south, a rickety barbed wire fence, along which tumbleweeds were caught like dry brown corpses in an abandoned web. Until a few years ago, Arlo Haas had said, the fields that stretched out on both sides had been planted in beets. Now the ones to the north, leased to a local winery, nurtured vineyards. The ones to the south lay fallow. Ahead, the farm buildings, house, barn, a couple of storage sheds, an unstable-looking windmill, were arranged against a long, ravine-like crease where the nearest of the barren hills came together. Beyond the house, an extension of the farm road curled up the side of one hill and over its crest. As I neared the farmyard, I noticed movement up there. Somebody on foot, coming along the road from the other side. A woman, I thought. I could make out long, dark hair blowing wild in the wind. Grady Haas? She stopped abruptly, leaning forward, and stood poised for a few seconds, watching my approach. Then she was gone, back the way she'd come. Not walking, almost running. Yeah, I thought. Grady Haas. The house was at least 3/4 of a century old, 2-storied with a pillared gallery at the second-floor level. It had once been painted a dark red, but the red had faded to the color of dusty brick. The white trim was flaked and faded as well. It reminded